Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. I've got the afternoon slot where the Israeli snacks have kicked in. One of the direct results of those is that you tend to get a little bit tired. So bear with me. I'm talking about something that sounds at first light completely ridiculous. It's completely obscure, right? Skateboarding on a cruise ship. Something that I just thought about, kind of came into my mind. I'm hoping by the end of this presentation, you guys will be able to understand that not only is this not just a crazy, obscure idea, that actually if you had a couple of million quid lying around for a business opportunity, this is something you might consider thinking about going into. But before we get into that, I have a confession to make. I've worked for the last 15 years in technology data companies, from Oracle into web analytics and now at SimilarWeb. And I have to be a little bit careful with my boss and my CEO sitting in the room, but I got a confession to make. I hate data. I really, really dislike data. In fact, the last time I remember really enjoying data was as a kid when I used to play Top Trumps. Everyone in the room know Top Trumps? Great kids game. You pick a specific data point on the cards. It was always, for me, if you got the Ferrari F40, you knew you had to play the 0 to 60 mile an hour data point. As long as you played that data point, you would win the game. Data wins arguments. So as I've progressed in my career and as I've evolved, I've had to learn how to fall in love with data. I was able to walk into meetings, and I used to be able to just use my gut. I'm still pretty much a gut-driven guy. I've worked in sales for 15 years, and sales guys are the worst at this. We go with our instinct and we go with our gut. However, I've understood that when you walk into a meeting, you have to have data to support what you're saying. In fact, if you want to understand where a lot of the power sits in an organization, very often just have a look at who owns BI within the organization. This is my wife's mug. She's an accountant. She loves spreadsheets. I hate spreadsheets. And the first 20 minutes of every meeting used to be spent arguing over the data points that everybody had. It was like, my data's correct. No, my data's correct. Well, where did you get yours from? I pulled mine from here. Where did you pull yours from? Well, mine came from the CRM. Mine came from the operational system. Mine came from here. BI created a $20 billion industry based on the fact that everyone started a meeting with data and everyone had to sing from the same hymn sheet. Everyone had to start with the same data point. It solved the first 20 minutes, and it got rid of what we like to call hippos, highest paid person opinion. It's a great acronym. In SimilarWeb, we have a number of hippos. Sometimes it's me in the room, usually it's Jason, most of the time it's Or. And the only way to actually kill a hippo is with data. If you have data, you are able to back up your opinion. You are able to come in and say, I think what I'm saying is correct, not just because I think I'm correct, but I've got data to support me. In God we trust, all others must bring data. Unfortunately, our CEO, Or, doesn't believe in God, so we have to walk into meetings with data. And if you think about it, I've worked in the marketing technology industry for a really long time. And one of the reasons, if you will, that I dislike data even more so in marketing is that attribution is still incredibly difficult. It is still incredibly difficult to say that this campaign that I did or this ad that we ran drove this amount of sales. Attribution is still a huge problem in marketing. And we really have to understand that when we bring that data, we have to look at multiple different points and multiple different things in order to come up with our opinion. Now, when I look at my favorite person in marketing, it's got to be Don Draper. How many people in the room have seen Mad Men? Okay, if you haven't, get on Netflix. It's great. It's awesome. Don Draper is one of my idols. I'm relatively convinced that I was born in the wrong city, in the wrong time. I need to be living in New York in the 50s. I'd be doing so much better in life. Don Draper never use data. In 7 series of Mad Men, every time data comes up, he pretty much disregards it. You have the big IBM mainframe that's brought in at one stage, he disregards it. They have the psychologist reports and the data that's coming out of that, Don Draper disregards it. He goes off on one of his jaunts, he comes up with an idea, he figures out how to sell you happiness, and he never relies on data to do it. And I think that it's incredibly interesting because even Don Draper admits that change happens. And he doesn't say whether it's good or bad, it simply is. And he understands that the world is going to change. And we all understand the world is going to change. And actually, if we look at a market which has been incredibly disrupted, it's advertising and agencies and marketing. And we understand that Don Draper was one of the best salespeople, although fictional, in his time, whereby he was able to tell a story, to take an idea, and to take things forward. My favorite person in modern day sales, I think sales, as we saw from DHL earlier, sales has evolved massively. In fact, one of the people who I think has defined how much sales has evolved is Daniel Pink, who's a motivational psychologist, wrote a brilliant book called Drive, looking at motivational theory, and has written a book called To Sell is Human. In it, he defines that every single conversation we have, every single day, irrespective of whether we're in sales, whether we're in analytics, whether we're a street cleaner, it doesn't matter. Every time you want to convince someone of something, you are selling them. Every interaction that we have where we're trying to move someone or change someone's opinion or get them to do something is, in effect, sales. And he wrote a book called To Sell is Human, where he redefined the ABC of selling. Think about it like this. I don't know whether any of you have seen a very old sales film called Glengarry Glen Ross with a young Martin Sheen, and he gets on the board and he says, ABC, always be closing. Old school sales. Daniel Pink redefined this and said that to sell today is attunement, buoyancy, and clarity. So what do we mean by attunement? Attunement is the idea to say that you have to get out of your own opinion and you have to align with the other person. You have to find common ground. You have to find something that you can both agree on. It's in essence that move to what DHL and what Leda called before consultative selling. Data is one of the best ways of doing that. If the two of you can agree on the data point, you can immediately find common ground and be structured around that. Buoyancy, where he talks you still have to be positive, there's still a human aspect to sales, there's still the energy and everything else that's needed within that. And the last one is clarity. Excuse me. The ability to move a buyer and migrate them to your opinion by curating the information that's out there. When we talk about insight, when we talk about data, we don't just want to dump data at people. There's so much data out there. We need to be curators of that data. We need to take the points and the insight from that data and tell the story for the people that we're trying to give clarity to. Because data doesn't always give clarity, it sometimes gives even more confusion. And as DHL pointed out, my favorite data point, and when I started to learn to love data, was based on ROI. There is no better data point than ROI. Your ability to turn around to a customer and say, if you do this, here's the number that you're going to get from it, is incredible. Talking of sales, and talking of my favorite sales guy, Leonardo DiCaprio gets his second time up here on the board today. The Wolf of Wall Street is one of the best sales films, in my opinion. And Jordan Belfort was one of the best sales guys of his time. However, when you look at Jordan Belfort's sales ability, it wasn't just based on his charisma. He found pain points. He went for an old school sales strategy. But when we look at the industry, and it's interesting that we're sitting here in the city of London, where the traders, we're in the traders' playground. There is no industry, when you go back in time, that was more gut and instinct-driven than trading, investment banking, making calls. These guys would feel the market, they'd feel a company, they'd try and understand, I think this is going to do well, and then make trades on their gut. Best traders used to think they could trade on their gut. Today, it is no longer the wolves of Wall Street, it's the data scientists of Wall Street. And these guys consume a heck of a lot less cocaine. Now, there's the ability here to understand that you take an industry like this, which now understands that they have to use data to make their decisions. They have to use data to come up with the right trades, with the right things to do. However, there is a huge amount of data literally everywhere. And that creates a challenge. How do I know what the right data point is? How do I know where, within that plethora of data that's out there, that ubiquitous data that's all over the world, where is the opportunity and where is the noise? How do I get rid of that noise where there's just so much of it? There's so many data points. If you think about the amount of data we heard just now, Snapchat, how many billions of photos are taken every day on the platform. Being able to filter through that and find the insight and find the information that is relevant is what enables you to start conquering the world and winning your markets. When you look at the traders, they've already started understanding that. We're already today working with most of the investment houses, most of the equity researchers, and when they now put out a buy or a sell or a hold recommendation, they have to come to that argument with the relevant data points. And by the way, we're one of those relevant data sources that they will use to back up and support their argument, to back up and choose that opinion that they're giving, and they have to have data to support it. And data gives you that ability to find new opportunities and to cut through the noise to see where that opportunity lies. Now, it wouldn't be a presentation of mine without throwing up food. I have a hard rule. Any presentation I give for SimilarWeb, I have to throw up food. We talked about Nike before. Nike's slogan is just do it. Mine is generally just eat. So it's a great example, I think, of where opportunity in data lies. Around 5-6 years ago, there were a couple of data scientists who were working at Just Eat. And I have to be honest with you, this story is hearsay. I heard it from someone else in Just Eat. I don't actually know the Chinese chain. I don't actually know the people personally. However, there were two data scientists in the early days of Just Eat who started trawling through the data they were working in the organization. And they saw that you're talking about 50-60% of the traction in Just Eat was coming from Chinese takeaways, delivery-only Chinese takeaways. They used that data, extrapolated within it what geographies they were talking about. They left Just Eat 2 months later, opened up a chain of 5 or 6 highly successful delivery-only Chinese restaurants. The gold was in that data, and they were able to very quickly see where the opportunity was in order to go forward and take it. So data can very often be the catalyst for the disruption. I know we talked about on the panel earlier, do we think disruption has sped up? Absolutely, there's an ability not just to think that disruption has sped up, but the access to the information, to the catalysts, the ability to make new platforms quickly and easily, and the speed of technological change has meant that the disruption is definitely there. Data can both be an enabler to that, and it can be a catalyst for it as well. And what I'm going to do now is just walk through a couple of examples of companies who are disrupting, disruptors who are out there, how they're using data, and some industries that are being disrupted. So we're sitting in the City of London. It's only right to talk about banking. And as you guys know, banking is broken. It's completely broken. And I don't just mean the financial recession. I don't just mean the investment houses. Personal banking is horribly broken. Just to give you a context, though, of how far it's moved in the last 10 years, when I first started my career at Oracle, selling to financial services, I met some of the guys who had worked in the infancy of online banking. And until even the dot-com bust, until like 2000, online banking at Barclays worked very simply. You would go online, you would put in your transaction, whether it was a trade or a money transfer or whatever it was. That transaction would go to Barclays, to someone in an office, who would take the printout of that online transaction. he would take it, swivel over to another terminal, and have to go to the legacy mainframe to physically, manually put in the transaction that you just done online. That's one of the reasons why banking has taken so long to catch up, that those legacy mainframe systems have been incredibly difficult to move forward. Now, today, a new challenge is presenting to the banking world, but still on a similar vein. We live in a completely global economy. Globalization is there. How many people here have left the UK this year? Holiday, anything like that? Pretty much everyone, right? We live in a global world. When we look at today's expectations, today's consumer expectations, we expect the freedom to spend money where we want, when we want. We expect it to be a frictionless experience. It's absurd that if you're transferring money to someone, it takes 5 days to clear that transaction. Yet I can go outside, order myself an Uber, I can see where that Uber is, how long it's going to take to get to me, get in it and move forward. So the expectations that consumers have tremendously changed, and we live in a global economy. We now have cryptocurrencies, and we have the fact that our expectations for micropayments, transfers, we want to spend digital money the same way that we spend cash. Hence, we've seen a revolution in the banking industry, which is led by two companies up here, Revolut and Monzo. And the growth, I don't know, how many people in the room have heard of Revolut? How many people have used Revolut? Okay, so there's still a growth there. Everybody's heard of it. Not everybody's used it yet. I have to be honest with you. Despite the accent, I moved to our headquarters in Tel Aviv about 8 years ago. And it's very interesting for me because I actually hadn't heard of Revolut before I started looking into this. But Revolut's ability to go out there in the market and reimagine what banking should look like has really started to take off massively. For those of you who don't know, they do feeless money transfer, crypto trading, and cashback. They're now bridging into insurance, micropayments, and currency conversion. The vision is that you should be able to use a credit card as easily as you use cash. And these websites have massively grown over the last year or two. We start seeing that both Monzo and Revolut are basically neck and neck in their growth as the website traffic for them is increasing. And whenever I do an analysis, I like to put myself in the shoes of my prospect or my customer. So just for a minute, I want you to imagine that I'm the chief strategy officer for Monzo. And I want to really look into what's going on with Revolut and how I can win against them. And here we can immediately see they've had 600% increase in traffic to their website. The bounce rate has gone down by 20%. So the quality of this traffic, not only have they increased in traffic, but the quality of that traffic has massively increased as well. These are real users. They're not just one-time people. These are people that are actually using the product. Not only are they using the website, they're using the app. The install penetration is at nearly 2% of the UK market. That's phenomenal. And when you look at the active users, it's increased 200% year on year. So this isn't just people doing a one-time money transfer or going on holiday. These are people that are using Revolut as their primary banking application. And they've got a massive increase in sessions and users. When we look at that hypergrowth as well, we can see that they're using the app not just on day one, not just the same way. If you look with transfer money, so TransferWise is pure money transfer, meaning by day 30, most people have stopped using the app. However, Revolut gives such a good experience that actually you check it on a daily basis, you'll see all the interactions, the transactions, and you'll actually use it as often as you open your wallet. So where is Revolut growing? So we know they just took on even more money, another 250 million in funding in order to grow. And if I'm the strategy officer for Monzo, I want to understand what's happening inside Revolut. So if anyone in the room hasn't used SimilarWeb before, hasn't seen our data before, I can access any website, any app, any market, any industry, any geography, and I can start understanding what's happening in it. So when I start looking at Revolut, I can see which countries Revolut's traffic is coming from. So if I'm Monzo, I can start seeing Revolut has got a really good reputation in the States, and it's growing massively in terms of website traffic to the States. But you would expect that. It's the highest number of web traffic area. Australia, though, is fascinating because generally that's not such a big country, not generating that much web traffic. However, as a percentage of Revolut's traffic, it's quite high and it's growing. The other ones that stand out there are Canada and obviously Brazil. So I can start understanding which markets might be ripe. Now, I know this is a more complex discussion involving things like legislation, involving which banking authorities are going to give you licenses, etc. But when we look at it purely from the data points in terms of the market, we can even start understanding which countries, which visitors from which countries to Revolut's website are interested in which products within Revolut's website. And this is done by looking at our popular pages. So we can see money transfer is obviously the highest, and unsurprisingly in Brazil, it's a massive percentage. Brazil going through a huge amount of instability in the country right now. People are desperate to get their money out, and they'll try any which way they can. Cryptocurrencies has strong growth in most of the countries, but in Brazil, you can see, again, very high, especially in Australia, where there seems to be a very big interest for that. One of the most interesting things for me on this as well, though, is that the travel insurance and the mobile phone insurance is very high in Australia. This, to me, might be indicative that users there are maybe just traveling. So there's a high number of people that are taking out a Revolut card to travel to Australia, or expatriates who are also looking for other services, but want to do it from a company that they already trust. So in terms of Revolut, some of the takeaways I would look at is that they've conquered the UK market and are then looking to expand the rest of the world. Start with one, win it, and then understand very quickly and easily, both in terms of the market and the competitors, which other countries are showing a big increase in relation to interest. Use the data to guide your strategy and have a comprehensive product offering. Understand what products are out there. So you can disrupt a very old industry very quickly and easily when you come up with the problem and you use the data to find the right solutions. But that's an industry that I know is going to be disrupted. It's banking. It's broken. We all know it's broken. What about an industry that, you may say, in my industry, there aren't any disruptors. We're not going to be disrupted. It's too old. It's too archaic. So let's define a disruptor for starters, right? For me, I just took an estimation, and you can play with this. But a website that's got to be significant enough, so it's getting already over 1 million monthly visitors, and it has 100% year-on-year growth. With SimilarWeb, you don't have to be a data scientist. You don't have to be that guy at Just Eat as a data scientist going into that. You can jump straight into our lead generator, and very quickly and easily, you can pick your market, define your industry, look at the country. And for me, I looked at the travel industry. I thought, this is interesting. Let's look at the travel industry. Let's look at websites that have grown more than 1 million, that have over 1 million website visits and have grown more than 100% year on year. And when I look at the top 5 websites that our lead generator returned on this, I see that 3 of them are cruise websites. Now, everyone knows that the cruise industry is huge. And most of the time, you hear it by word of mouth. There aren't massive billboards on the A1 saying, go on a cruise. There is advertising, there is supplements, there is advertising that is done, but very often this is a word of mouth industry. But actually the growth, when you look at these websites, is phenomenal. And 3 out of the 5 fastest growing websites in the industry, in the travel sector, are cruises. This has a total economic value in terms of the cruise market of about $126 billion. It's a massive market, and it's still growing phenomenally fast. In fact, when we look at the travel industry as a whole, we can see that it's only grown in the last year around 8%. By the way, if I was a big corporate, I'd be very happy with 7-8% growth. But as a sector, travel has grown 7-8%. That's pretty much in line with the rest of the internet in terms of traffic. Cruises, as a category within SimilarWeb, has grown nearly 77%. This is still a fast-growing industry that isn't just big, it's still growing. And what's really fascinating is if I want to go in and understand those disruptors, you wouldn't necessarily think of cruise ships as disruptors, but they are having a big impact on the travel industry. This is fascinating. When you think travel, everybody today thinks online travel aggregators. Booking.com, TripAdvisor, Kayak, Expedia. They're not playing in the cruise space. Now, I'm not 100% sure why, but I have a couple of ideas about it. One of which I think is that they specialize in finding flights and hotels, which generally are bookings that you make based on price or other criteria. Cruises are a very long research type engagement, and that's showing in terms of who's winning the traffic for those keywords. Nearly 70% of the traffic for the keyword cruise is owned by specific niche sites. Cruise Critic, P&O Cruises, Virgin Holiday Cruises, Igloo and Princess are the biggest players in the UK market when it comes to cruises. So we're really looking at it, and we're able to even go further on the niche and understand which areas people generally know where they want to go on a cruise to. So it's a niche industry, it's owned by niche players, and it is continuing to grow at a very, very fast rate. So the cruise industry has experienced that growth. And by the way, just think about it from this angle. I've shown you this on the travel industry. This took me about 10 minutes to come up with. On the travel industry, and I'm not a data scientist. And I'm able to validate who are the disruptors in the travel industry, what's growing fast, and how to understand that. And I can take a hypothesis, which is my auntie and uncle, and everyone's auntie and uncle is talking about that amazing cruise they went on. But is that industry really growing as fast as we think it is? And with the SimilarWeb data, you can validate it, and it is. When you look at the niche websites, they still have space to grow in a research-driven industry. And you want to keep track of these disruptors. So it may be important, I think in the panel it was said, in terms of disruptors, you might only start seeing them within the SimilarWeb data set once they become big enough. But keeping track on that on a regular basis to see which websites, like Revolut or Monzo, you would have seen it earlier in the data in terms of that growth, defining your category and criteria to keep track of that growth and understand where the disruption is actually happening. So we're talking about niche experiences, and personally for me, the best experience I had in the last year was going to the semi-final of the World Cup in Moscow. It was a phenomenal experience, it was a sporting experience, but it was pretty mass. I mean, the whole country was in euphoria. It wasn't really niche. When you look at the cruise sites, again, it's a big experience, and it's becoming quite niche. So when I think about niche sporting experiences, the next one that comes to my mind is the Tokyo 2020 Olympics. Full of sports, most of them relatively niche. The interest is already starting to peak in relation to interest in the Tokyo 2020 Olympics. I can see that even the traffic in February for the 2020 Olympics site was actually primarily not coming from Japan, it was coming from outside of Japan. As we move closer to the event, the Japanese are now becoming more and more interested. I go to Tokyo a fair bit. It's a big part of our business at SimilarWeb. And actually, you're already starting to see all of the billboards and the placards and the noise that's created around it. I'm sure everyone here remembers London 2012 and the buzz that was created around that. So that's starting already in Tokyo. But it got me thinking, well, what's going to be big at the Tokyo 2020 Olympics? And actually, the first thing you can see is volunteering is huge. People are already starting to be very interested. And this is visitors from the US who want to go to Tokyo to volunteer at the Olympics. The other one, though, that spiked my interest was skateboarding. Skateboarding is a brand new sport that's being released for the 2020 Olympics and being added, and it is already one of the most popular search keywords that's driving traffic into the Tokyo 2020 Olympics. Not just from America, but also from Japan as well. So you're able to immediately see on a global basis what niche areas are already picking up traction at this early stage in relation to the 2020 Olympics. And we can even see, if we look at all of the sports, so the other one that cycling is still going to be huge, I think, as it always is, skateboarding, and the other new sport for the 2020 Japan is karate as well. So we're starting to see that those new sports are gaining interest and gaining significant traction. So my initial proposition, skateboarding on a cruise ship, sounds completely ridiculous, and for some reason this looks like a photoshopped image. It's not. It's a real image from a real cruise that actually took place last year, run by Red Bull, around the Mediterranean, specifically targeted at skateboarders. It would stop for one day in each of the Mediterranean cities. They would get out, go around the city, find cool places to skateboard, come back on the cruise, and have a great experience at night. So this is a real thing that exists. Cruise skateboarding, Let me rephrase that. It's a real thing that exists. It's a cruise ship specifically tailored for skateboarders. So if I had a couple of million to invest, I would probably look at commandeering a cruise ship, targeting it at skateboarders, taking it to the Bay of Tokyo for the 2020 Olympics, and designing an experience built around that. And I can already see that the traction is starting in order to be able to justify that. So something that sounded crazy, I can walk into a meeting and actually say there's justification for looking at this and for thinking about going in this type of direction. Now, as we said throughout the day, there's other data points that you have to look at. There's other considerations from a commercial standpoint, but you need to really start thinking about how you're able to integrate that data into the way that you work. So I think it's key that you want to build data into everything that you do. And I think every company already understands that. From the BI department and the millions and billions that's being spent on your internal data, actually you want to gain a far more holistic view of what's happening. You want to take that data and enable your companies with it. Because when you stand on the shoulders of data, you're actually listened to far, far better within your company, far better within your organization. When you enable your organization to stand on the shoulders of that data, you can see beyond the horizon. You can see the disruptors. You can even have the catalyst to be disruptive, to understand something that no one else yet understands or no one else yet fully appreciates the size and the context of. And this is incredible because it allows you to advance your companies and advance yourselves within your companies. We're just seeing, I think now, when we talk about disruption, we're only seeing now the beginnings of how market intelligence, of how using this data can revolutionize the way that companies work. Historically, this data was locked away in silos, or it was in multi-million-dollar reports that Nielsen created for your C-suite. Today, we're giving you the ability to take this data and win these arguments across your entire organization, whether it's your sales team, whether it's your strategy team, whether it's your marketing team. Not only can you use it to win your markets and win your conversations, but you can use it to actually operationalize and perform better, whether it's in your marketing teams or your sales teams or your investor teams. So I think in reality, you guys have an incredible opportunity to work with data quickly and easily, make sense of it, and then be the change makers within your organization. Thank you very, very much.